Good morning. Thank you for
Good
meeting with me
morning.
today.
Oh, yeah, my pleasure. Always a pleasure meeting with you, Matt. So, just a little bit of what we're going to talk about today, given that we're going to be sharing this session. This is a typical mentoring session that I have with Matt pretty much every week, where we just go over his case studies, any progress that he has made in the past week, and anything that he wants to talk about. It's pretty open. Usually, it's not that structured. We have an idea of what we're going to talk about beforehand. And last week, he told me that this week, he would like to go over a case study for Moss, which is a project that he worked on for a company. And I will let you take it from here, Matt, because you know more about that than me.
Yeah, so this is actually really exciting because I'd worked on this project before and it really kind of began my love for user experience design and I didn't know much about it. So this was like a really early attempt at it. It's something that I've been really proud of and I'm super excited to show you this project and hear your feedback on it because every time we meet, I just like learn so much and there's so many things that you see that I would never have thought of and I think that's like kind of the basis of learning is I don't know what I don't know until you look at it and you show me a different perspective.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, and that's what I love about mentors. Also, in my case, that when I present something to a mentor on my side, I'm like, oh wow, I didn't even think about that. So it's great. I love mentorship both ways, so I highly recommend it to everyone. But yeah, so do you want to share your screen or how?
Absolutely.
Um, but
So this is one of the few projects that I am able to share and show the results and just show some of the stats that we have from it. We started off with a almost completely blank slate. There was a website in place, but it was really outdated and it didn't really serve them for what they needed. So starting from scratch, I found this Garner index, which was really interesting, and it allowed me to understand how different fast casual restaurants are showing up in a digital presence. So we started from there, and then we were able to allocate some resources in different directions. Understanding the user is obviously always a really important part of the journey. And it's super important with understanding digital literacy, especially in areas like where their restaurants are based. There's a lot of older patrons. It's actually a really dynamic customer base because they have places in Florida, which is kind of a oh, shoot. I'm getting a little over wordy here.
Oh no, that's totally fine. Like it happens when you're presenting work. One thing that I would recommend so far though, it's that you first start when you're navigating the case study with the a little bit about the company. So you set the stage because right now you're talking about how they wanted to improve their online presence, but I'm not still clear what do they do and why it was important to them to get to that point.
That's a super good point. All right, let's start from the top. So, Moe's Barbecue is an interesting company because I started working with of the franchise, and then it was a product that ultimately all the franchisees would have to interact with. So we went from about four stakeholders to about 30 stakeholders. And it was important that it represented all these different groups of people. The competitor analysis was really interesting because it allowed us to look at how other fast casual restaurants are kind of presenting themselves online. And this is a really crazy graph, but if you just look at one color at a time, you can see like Chick-fil-A is this really sharp green. And what they're doing is they're choosing specific areas to provide more presence. And then there are certain areas that they aren't so focused on. So, like e commerce, Chick fil A wasn't super interested in that, but they were very interested in Facebook, which is interesting because that's a little bit more of a conservative audience. So, understanding the user, it was very broad because there's a variety of different people that are going to be using this site across multitude of different sites. What we were able to do is like boil down exactly what bothered people and exactly what motivated people. And sharing great barbecue meal with friends is something that like is really the guiding light for this entire website. So then another big part of this website was a couple years ago. So the mobile optimization needs were not being met with the previous website, which was actually kind of a catalyst for this. And then I'd really like to
And
talk about.
what is that? What is that that just you passed through really quick? Was that something that the company already had, and you were thinking about how to integrate that branding that they had in the tote bag to the website?
This is something that I was communicating to the stakeholders as we had this red and we had this lockup, but that was about it. And we needed something that began the conversation. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. Is none of these people had a technical background, so everything that I did for them, I really tried to lay out with as much detail as possible. And when we get to wireframes, even the wireframes had photos in them. So outside of like the site maps, which we did with sticky notes in a very traditional way, everything was kind of set up to create this feeling or environment with them. So this was one of the first pictures we took to kind of establish the vibe and understand that this website should feel like that Southern hospitality that you get when you walk into a restaurant.
And how
Um,
was the artistic direction there? Do you had a photographer that the company was working with?
so yeah, so that's a really good question. I was a one-man band on this. It was
Oh, so you were the one that took the picture.
Yeah, so I was taking the photography, which obviously has its challenges, but it's also just like I really love when I can work kind of across the entire spectrum and being able to create assets that fit into the mood that I'm trying to create on a website is I always enjoy it. It's more work, but it's a cool experience.
Yeah, that's
So
something that definitely make sure that every element that you have in the screen, you let people know why it is there, what was your involvement there. You don't mention it, people don't know, and it's great that you actually were the one that made everything that it's here in this screen. Just make sure that from the beginning, maybe, perhaps you don't have to say it in each one of the elements, given that everything that you're presenting, as you were saying, you were a one-man band, so you did everything. So you can lead with that. So everything that you will see here, I did it myself, from photography to branding to the website to every touch point. That way you don't have to be repeating it as you walk through the project.
that's a great call out, especially for the structure of a presentation, is like kind of establishing responsibility or deliverables at the beginning.
Yeah,
That's a
that's really
great.
important. I don't think that I do for the case studies so much, but I know that I have to touch on that when I'm talking. But when I'm doing it for example, presentations that I sent without any context, and I know that that presentation has to talk by itself, in that first slide, I always say what the name of the project, who were the people involved, and what was my main role, because it's important for people to understand what was your contribution.
Yeah, I just love the way that you say a presentation has to talk by itself because sometimes we send stuff off and it just has to like totally support itself. And that's such a different experience than a presentation. So here's getting into the wireframe sketching. And as you see from the second part of the linear progression, we have the menu, which is really important. But the first part, this is a couple of years ago, and this was before Google Maps really had a formula, and like we're so familiar with it today, but we wanted to make sure that every time someone interacted with this website, they knew the information that they needed. So hours and location, we kept at the top of all of these websites. As we
Mhm.
revisit this going forward, we're talking about kind of moving those into a location that's not as prominent because our modern Google interface, you're presented that information kind of on the slot or kind of on the page before you get to this website. And now, once you're getting to this website, you're seeing stuff a lot more. So, like mobile ordering, menu, dietary information. So, that was a big consideration. Getting people the information that they need as quickly as possible and as efficiently as possible and looking
Yeah.
at some of the page durations, people are doing that. We're seeing durations that are relatively short but frequent. So the website's serving that purpose.
And where is that stated? Do you have it somewhere in the copy? Because I'm not seeing it.
No, that's a really good call out. I was just
Okay,
looking
yeah.
at
So then make sure to add it somewhere there. Like you, I think that you had a good instinct going all the way down to the results.
here's something that we talked a little bit more about at the top where I was working with a team of stakeholders that weren't very technical. So every time that I would present something to them, it would be associated with visuals to support that idea. And then the takeaways, and like we talked about, it's going to be important to share some of the data. And I'd love to hear your perspective on start off at the top with kind of those big shiny numbers. But then when we get to the takeaways at the bottom, it's a little bit more like narrative or story driven. Do you think that I should bring some of those stats that I had at the top down to the bottom?
It will be ideal. I don't know if you're able to get the data that they had before that revamp. Like, for example, let's say that they had 5 million unique visitors. That way you can compare. Well, now we got 2 million more, or we got like 0.5K more orders or something like that. So do you think that you could get that information from them? If not, you can also say it in the takeaways. But if there was a way to estimate the percentage of the lift, even if it's not exactly accurate, but having an idea, maybe the business owners will have an idea, at least at the top of their head. Oh, yeah, after we did all this revamp, I saw that the orders increased 10%. So maybe they have an overall idea, even if it's not down to those numbers. But if that's something that you can get from them, I would recommend reaching out if you don't have them now, which I assume you don't, and that's why you didn't include them there. But that's a good way to just like any data that you can collect from the before, that is where you actually show the impact of the work that you did.
Absolutely. Um, I have a question about presenting information. Coming from a place where there was no store, so revenue was $0, how would you present you put that into a percentage? Or like what do you feel is the most effective way of presenting that information?
So I think I will benchmark it against industry trends for businesses like that. I will do a research, like for example, if it's a mom and pop business that usually has 100 people per day passing through, whatever that a business like that in that area usually makes, can expect to make, then benchmark it against that average.
That's such a good point to bring in like industry kind of stand or like
Exactly. Yeah.
benchmark.
If you don't have any point where to start off, just base it off in terms of like, well, generally what's out there.
That's a really good point. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Okay. So do you think that you have a way to get those numbers?
Yeah, I think in the initial proposal, we ran through numbers and we had kind of early KPIs that I should revisit.
Perfect. So if you are able to get that, put that in the takeaways. I think it's great that you're leading with the numbers there. It feels like, okay, this person cares about the numbers, but then how you tied it up to what you did and how it improved the before, that would be amazing. And a small point there that I'm seeing is that if you see the three numbers, the 1.7K, it's a little bit higher there for some
I
reason. I
do,
don't
yeah.
know.
Good,
So yeah,
good
it's a
call out.
small detail there. This is something that I think I have mentioned before, but overall, I think that the font could be a little bit bigger on your website. It feels like the string becomes too long to read given the font size. I think that it's probably about 25% longer than it should be to make it comfortable to the eye to actually read the entire string. So it's more because of that I'm recommending it, although the font size I think could be a little bit bigger too.
Yeah.
Um, competitor analysis. Here, I would love to see exactly what you mentioned there. Like, add a quick example as a second paragraph. Like, you can see how chicken fillet has a lot of presence in YouTube, but not so much in site speed, for example. And then make it easier to understand where most exist there. Because I'm not sure looking at it, were you able to get data as a whole or where most actually stands out?
Yeah. So I can go back and I can revisit their efforts. This was a really early just kind of direction as far as this is where brands are putting effort and across their competitors or like their landscape. But what I can do is I can go back and be like, all right, so this is what my suggestions were. This is where they found themselves in the spectrum.
Yes, exactly. That would be great. So that's something that I would add. That way, it's not only a competitor's analysis, is how you apply that competitor analysis to understand where. that business stands. And a small detail here, it's like brands just add a period at the end. And then when you go down to user, one thing that I thought that you were going to have a callback to it was that you mentioned that it was very important for the average user to have it all around family meals, like sharing with friends, which is something that I'm reading now here again. And I would love to hear a little bit more throughout the narrative of the case study, how you made that possible. You touch upon how fast the user can find the location, and also how easily the user could see the menu, and also a little bit about the photography that you were giving that vibe that was very welcoming and southern with all the elements that you were putting. But I didn't see any direct reference tying it up to creating that atmosphere that was inviting for friends and family. So I think a great addition there to the case study will be perhaps a few screens of how you made that possible.
Yeah, that's such a wonderful observation, and it's so important to the brand. And that's like a really good North Star for this entire website is like how at every step are we kind of like harkening back to that idea.
Exactly. And then overall, if you have the screens, because given that this was a project that was done a couple of years ago, maybe they changed the website, or I don't know, you don't have the screens, but if you have the screens, I would recommend you to put as many screens as you can. Maybe we can give it a pass to see which ones to show, because right now I'm just getting two screens pretty much from the website, this one and the one that is inside the computer. So
Yeah.
it makes me wonder, well, how did the website look like? If we could get a glance at how that wireframe actually turned into the high fidelity or the actual mockup, that would be great. Also, I think the wireframe goes together. I'm talking about just the header of the section. You see that it says wireframe sketch right
Oh,
there in the screen. Yes, that one there. I think so. That's how I've always seen it, but maybe you can write it both ways.
no, I think you're absolutely right.
And did they have a website before? I'm not sure if you mentioned that.
Yeah, they had a website and it's really old. Unfortunately, I was uh, so excited to reshape it that I didn't
You
document.
didn't take pictures. I wonder because I think that I saw once that there was a website where you could go back to how sites look like that were stored in somewhere. So that would be really cool if you could go back to how it looked like in 2021 and just take a snapshot of it and then show side by side what were the visual changes and the impact that it had to, given that that was mainly what you were focusing on. So in terms of a structuring, I see that you have the skateboarding there next to the screen. And at the top, if you move a little bit over, I think conceptually it makes more sense that when you're talking about branding, you have the skateboarding next to the bag, because it's like all the components that you're looking outside the digital space that you prepare for them. If you prepare more than those two, also include them there so you can have an array of like you designed a mug or you designed whatever it is other than that. But then when you're talking about digital, make the two of them together. So you can have the website image and the website with the computer next to each other. That's fine, but it makes more sense given that you're mentioning those two different sections.
Yeah, I love that idea of like real life assets and then digital assets are kind of separate and you allow them to tell their own stories.
Exactly. Can you send me the link? That way I can scroll on my side.
Absolutely.
Okay, so if I were you, I would revisit the header sizes that I'm using for all the elements, and also just the array of how you are displaying the information. So it becomes a little bit more consistent. For example, for the competitor analysis and understanding the user, I see that you're using the same font than for branding. Makes sense because you're talking about three different categories, but then because the way that you are arraying the information for competitor analysis and understanding the user, it feels like they're minor points. So I will, if I were you, I will try to make the copy left align so the image can go below. And then, for example, speaking of branding, the images and also the tote bag design and even the website itself that you have there, it's part of branding. So I think that all of those components that I refer to menu will live better if they were under the branding category. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Perfect. For the wireframing sketch, oh, you can see in the wireframing sketch section that you're doing a little bit of what I mentioned of having the copy left aligned, and then if you want to add an image, maybe you can put it down below. And if you could create wireframes of how the pickup experience looked like, the menu, if the user was able to order directly from there when they tap, I see that there is a CTA in the section with a menu. Then the other small detail, it's the spacings. So here you see how the spacing here is like that, and here it seems pretty
Oh,
similar. But then
yes.
when you go here, you have boom, all of this empty space. And so as you are reordering the layout, like changing this to be next to the skateboarding, just make sure that you also check the spacings, so that way they are consistent all across. This is what I was telling you about. Maybe you can create a wireframe or two of how this experience work. That way you have three wireframes that you can put one after the other, and it just feels more robust because it indicates that you're not only designing the static page, but also actually all the other pages that are inside of it, which maybe your main focus was that homepage. Was that the case for this project, or you got to also redesign all of the things inside?
No, we redesigned the locations, we redesigned the about page. So there's
Hmm.
definitely three different pages that I can do. And that's
Oh,
a,
yeah,
yeah, that's cool to like stack them all up. And then also like,
exactly.
draw lines to them, I think is a fun way to wireframe.
Yeah, definitely show that because here, when I look at it, I think that you only did the redesign of the homepage, which is very common for small businesses that want to save money. But if you also have other screens that you redesign it, please include them here. That will be very important because just looking at the site here and all the screens that you have, it just feels to me that the main focus was the static homepage. So, all right, you can add here like three more wireframes. And so as I mentioned, in the mid-fidelity prototype, include the actual mid-fidelity prototype. Usually it's something that you can interact with, and then adding all the screens here instead of just like a glance of it. Um, and then I'm just thinking if it makes sense to have the picture here instead of perhaps how the website looked like. If you want to focus your portfolio more in terms of UX, UI, product experience, it may be wiser to consider the UI rendering as the picture that you're choosing here, just because it conveys a stronger presence in that sector. So that's what I was thinking. That may be a good place for some exploration like this one where it's visual. There is a lot of really great examples in Dribble or Behance. You know the ones that I'm talking about, like when you go to Dribble or Behance, the way that they present the screens is really cute. Something like that. I would love to see how it looks once you have the entirety of the site. We can go over it because here it's very hard to provide feedback specific to it because I'm not seeing the whole picture. But at the first glance, what I can say is that, for example, here the visibility becomes really low because of the color of the font, the background that it has, the lack of contrast, too many things going on, and it's a lot of copy. So if I had to recommend you anything, I know that this is already something that was built, but I will probably recommend adding at least an overlay that kind of like has some gradient that is black gradient that goes from here and then becomes transparent or clear on the way up. That way it kind of like separates visually a little bit more this copy from the background below and creates more contrast. So that's an easy fix that you can have there. But ideally what I'll have done is to just completely separate the about from everything here. And another small detail will be perhaps rethinking the CTA if it needs to be that long. That's something that in your next round, when you start this project again with the stakeholders, can we check conversions if it just says order online? Because most users will be familiar with what a CTA is, that if they tap there or if they click there, they will be able to order online. So just like place your online order online, give them a few options, and you can maybe A/B test them. And a small detail here, you see how all of these are bolded? Here, this one is not.
Yeah, that is weird.
So
Oh, yeah.
make sure that all of them are bolded. And social media, it feels like you didn't add enough padding perhaps, and check the spacings between the elements. You can see here how it has a way more space than between this one, and even less, like it gets shorter and shorter. And ideally all the components that you're using are going to have the same spacing between them. And then for social media, I will explore, instead of having a link, now that I was reading what the components actually say, maybe it's more standard to just have, as you have it here in the wireframe, the social links. So if they only have Facebook and YouTube and like one more, if there is not like they're all over the place with 10 social media sites, maybe you just include the logos somewhere in the page if it's important for them to have it above the fold. But maybe you don't need to have a page just for social media unless they have online articles or something like that that is going to be inside that page. And this line here, it's so subtle that it will look cleaner if you just don't add it, because right now it's not adding any value. So I will just remove it to make it look more polished. And for the future, I will recommend you to explore a different font that perhaps it's more close to these ones that you're using here in the branding, because I see that these are two different fonts than the one here, and these ones have more character. So if you could use something like that for it. And actually, I'm wondering why it says eagle here. Is that a type of burger, or what is that?
So Eagle is the like city that this restaurant is located in,
Ah,
which is
okay,
confusing.
okay.
Eagle's a weird city name.
Ah, got it. Yeah. So, okay. In the way that you're structuring the narrative, try to make sure that the user sees first, like here, I'm seeing first how the overall landing page looked and how it looked when the user picked the location. Because when I see this, what I first thought was that this was the actual homepage. And I was like, well, that's confusing because that's not the name of the business. Why did they change it? It's like it's inside a page that is the name of the burger that are going to order, but why then it says that it's daily ordering? So I think that would be very beneficial. Include all the screens side by side, saying this is the screen for the homepage, this is the screen for the ordering. So yeah, as I mentioned, in terms of fonts, try to look for fonts that have a little bit more character for the location name, and then these ones can be more plain. They don't need to have more that much character. They can be sans serif. That of course it's up to the stylistic choice, but they feel a little bit too complex for
Ooh.
information that is more basic, straightforward. So I think that it will look more modern if you were using something that is a little bit more simple. So yeah, that's pretty much everything that I have now. Takeaways, also look at the distance, but other than that, it looks very clean overall, as all the other pages in your site. It's just more a matter of reordering the content, make it really solid, make it speak for itself in areas like this one. Yeah, and tying it up to how you change it, that it looks more friends and family oriented. If you can get the data to put here of the increase before and after, try to look online if there is any site that you can look at the history of that site. That would be amazing. What else? Yeah, and then grouping everything where it makes sense. If you're talking about photography, you can put a bunch of the photography that you did, not only two. If you had like 10 that you took, try to see how in a way that is not overwhelming, showcase, like maybe you have one bigger one and then all the other ones below, or two bigger ones and then all the other ones below. So it shows that you actually did a lot of photography for this, not only two or three. If that is the case, yeah, it's just show more work. Given that you don't have the constraints of having a presentation that you're going to be sending and it needs to be 10 slides, here you have a little bit more room to play with showing more of the content that you prepared. Same for this, as I mentioned in branding. If you explore other things, even if they didn't make it through, you can put them there and say these ones didn't get implemented, but there were explorations that I showed stakeholders. So it shows that you're thinking about the brand holistically. Yeah, that's a brief. Hopefully it was helpful.
Oh my gosh, it's just when
Let me stop
I'm able
sharing.
to talk through stuff with you, it just is like there's so much learning, and I spend my days like looking at other people's case studies, but until you're able to like get in and really like look through all the details. That's where like I just learned so much from you and I appreciate it so much.
Thank you. I think that it really helps just to have a set of eyes that is not as invested in the project as you are, because you understand the intricacies of your project because you're familiar with it. But then when you have someone else and it's like, oh, wait, you didn't even tell me what moss was to start with. Well, what is it? I don't know. Like, I can speculate that it's some sort of business that has to do with food, but I'm not really sure. So when you talk to someone about it, it's very easy for you to be aware of, okay, what do I need to change in my narrative, because for others it's not there yet. That's why it's so important. I encourage everyone to share it with a friend, share it with someone that haven't heard about it at all, and see what they understand of what you are presenting. That way it shows how solid your narrative is, compared to what you thought it is.
Yeah, because you can't fill in the blanks in your head. Like they are seeing it with new eyes, and that's important. And then the fact that you just like are so knowledgeable about UX, it's like such a valuable resource, and I appreciate it so much.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Conversations with you, as I mentioned, they always bring me a lot of joy, and it helps me question a lot of things that now in my day to day they are just taken for granted, but maybe that's not the way it is. And yeah, best luck with everything coming up this following week. We'll see you probably in 2 weeks from now. I will stop the recording now, but we can chat a little bit more after, all right?
Perfect.
See you. Bye.
Bye.